Reports say at least 18 people died and 59 were injured in the blast. More than 1,000 people were inside when it was struck. Firefighters worked through the night alongside diggers to search for signs of life in the rubble. Our Europe correspondent Nick Beak is outside the shopping centre now. And Nick, can you paint us a picture of what it's like there?
Sarah, I can, because in the last few minutes the emergency services here have just moved us inside, so we're actually standing on the wreckage here. I can tell you just here in front of me, this was a cosmetic shop. It looks like there was some sort of face cream in bottles, other items, and just if I move further to the left, just being guided now, this was a toy shop, and you can see fragments of Barbie dolls, other pieces of clothes, and the authorities say that in this particular spot they found the greatest number of bodies. 11 bodies were found here at this toy shop, and just as I turn around now, you can't see any ambulances. This is a recovery operation. I expect you can hear some of the heavy machinery in the background. They've moved out a lot of debris already, but I mean, this has completely destroyed this place.
And the death toll at the moment is what, 18, which, given that there were 1,000 inside, we're not expecting that to rise?
This is complicated and I think slightly confusing. President Zelensky, in the minutes after the strike, said up to 1,000 people may have been inside. I think other officials here are talking about hundreds. In terms of how many people have actually died, we don't know. The authorities are not willing to be any more specific at this time. I can tell you though, earlier, Sarah, we were at a hospital, and the doctor there, the chief, just said that she knew of 18 individuals whose relatives had come in to her particular hospital, and they'd been looking for them, but they hadn't found them. So I think that really increases the fears that people have that the number of people who died will rise and rise again.
Well, we were just playing the sound of the air raid sirens that were going off this morning. I mean, what's the feeling in the city? It must be very jumpy.
It is. I mean, there's an awful sort of stillness to the place at times. We saw people laying flowers earlier on, and quite a few people, locals, had just come to sort of stare in disbelief. There was at one moment when the air raid siren went off, a procession of people moving to safety. We ourselves had to go to a bunker, and after a few moments we realised that the Interior Minister, Ukraine's Interior Minister, was there. So we were able to talk to him, and interestingly we put to him what Russia has been saying today, that this was an empty, disused shopping centre, and he said, well, you can see for yourselves that's probably not true. We also put to him what the Russians have been saying today, is that actually they successfully struck another factory nearby in which there were weapons from the EU, America and the West. He said that is not true, that is a fabrication as well. So the Ukrainians are being very clear about that today, and certainly the testimony of survivors, paints a horrific picture of this missile striking at a very, very busy time for this shopping centre. One man we spoke to said that he worked in an electrical shop and he thought about 100 people in there at the time.
Nick,
go on,
thank you very
Ranger.
much.
Is 50 miles an hour really the best?
Melinda Simmons is the British ambassador to Ukraine. Over the weekend, an apartment block was bombed in Kyiv, so I asked her if that brought the war closer to her.
It's about 2 million litres a month.
You know what they said? You don't want to do it, does they?
The number of air raid sirens have been rising, and of course there are responses to those air raid sirens. If you're in the subway, then the subway stops and waits for the all clear. If you're in a supermarket, the supermarket may close and direct you to a shelter. In the last couple of weeks there have been 4 or 5 of those a day, maybe 5, 6 of those a night. So you live in Kyiv even before the bombings themselves with a slightly raised level of anxiety anyway. And when you hear explosions, I think only once I've actually heard them happen, then of course it's followed by, a sense that Kyiv is no more out of scope for this invasion than any other part of Ukraine.
How long are you expecting it?
Well, I think it's a mistake actually to try to predict when this may end.
Indeed, but you must plan. What I'm imagining is how you plan, and is it on the assumption that come the end of the year there will still be a conflict going into next year?
Well, I think what we have seen is that it's turned into an attritional phase, particularly in the Donbass. And when it takes on that grinding nature, then you expect that this is going to go on for longer. therefore you try to plan accordingly. But I do
2023?
I think it's likely that it will go on into 2023. I wouldn't like to hazard a guess as to the end of it, but I think it's likely this would go on into the new year.
We're hearing today of announcements on increased defence spending. Does that send a message, make a difference to what happens in Ukraine?
We'll have to see what ministers say. I guess if that defence spending may relate as much to the perception of threat to all former Soviet Union countries or to countries in the Eastern Bloc, I don't know yet exactly what that means for Ukraine, but I do think it's a reflection of the UK's understanding of the broader implications of the threat.
Russia is holding, and pro-Russian separatists in the east of Ukraine are holding 2 Britons who were captured. They've been sentenced to death, Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner. I know you have been involved in the negotiations over them and whether they're possible release. Is there any reason to be hopeful?
So I can't comment on the negotiations themselves. It's quite important we don't actually, for the safety of those concerned. They are prisoners of war. They are not mercenaries, as they're so-called the grounds on which they've been tried in this sham trial by the so-called People's Republic of Donetsk and Luhansk. So the most important thing, first of all, is that as prisoners of war, they're entitled to their rights under the Geneva Convention. That's the first piece. The second piece, then, is that I know that the Ukrainian government is working hard on this. They were fighting for the Ukrainian armed forces alongside Ukrainian troops. And I am, and my colleagues are, talking daily now with the Ukrainian government about progress with that. So we are all concerned to make sure that their rights are adhered to and that we are able to secure the right outcome for them.
There's talk that there might be a state visit for President Zelensky to the UK. Are you able to confirm that?
No, I can't confirm that.
Would it help, do you think?
Well, it must depend on President Zelensky's perception of how things are going in his country. If he did travel anywhere at that time, it would be the first time for him leaving the country. And that's an important signal. So it must be for him to decide what makes the most sense. Until now, all his engagements with countries have been online. But we look in the UK at every single way that we can support the Ukrainian government. So if at the time a visit looks like it would be helpful and would make sense to do, then I can imagine him taking that offer were it to be made very seriously.
Melinda Simmons there, the UK's ambassador to Ukraine. The new head of the army here, General Sir Patrick Sanders, has told a conference at the think tank, the Royal United Services Institute, that this is our 1937 moment.
We're playing trading places. Let's see if we can work out where our trader is today from that first clue. A couple more clues to come as well. Let's get the latest on the roads for you. M25 at the QE2 bridge clockwise, looking a bit better now. We had an earlier traffic problem after a brief stoppage and then a lane closure. Everything seems to be running back to normal in that stretch. Just heading into London, it's quite busy on the A13 at the Barking crossroads. I can see some queuing all the way up to Barking on the A13 there. Just watch out on that front just whilst I have my eyes over the sensors there. Elsewhere, it's not looking too bad. We've still got the accident in Finchleyfield causing problems on the B1057 in both directions. And getting a bit busier on the Army and Navy roundabout approaches in Chelmsford. Next update, 1:45.
BBC Essex.
Hear the link.
The 2% is a flaw, not a seed. That was a campaign, by the way, that was began by the UK in Cardiff at a NATO summit. We're now seeing many more other countries come forward to match our spending.
Tobias Elford chairs the Defence Select Committee, Conservative MP. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
Do you agree with General Sir Patrick Sanders that this moment is akin to that of the 30s?
Yes, this is something that we've been saying for some time in our committee, that there's some difficult headwinds coming our way. This isn't just about Ukraine, but there's growing authoritarianism across the world. We've entered a new era of insecurity, and we've had it easy for the last 30 years, but there's been a chronic decline in Western influence and in our ability to defend democracy, as we're seeing in Ukraine. So Ukraine is just one small part of that equation. We're not able to stop Putin right now, and if we don't put this fire out in Ukraine, it would spread elsewhere. So it's absolutely right for the head of the army to say let's be prepared for what's coming over the hill.
Okay, which means what? What does it mean for money?
Well, you just talked about percentages. During the Cold War, we spent 4% of GDP on defence. We then went through, as I say, 30 years where it was relatively peaceful. So that's a peacetime budget. But last year, we then realised that we needed to spend more on cyber and space, and that's all very well. But it was to the detriment of the amount of money we could spend on the Army, Air Force and Navy. So we saw troop cuts, 10,000, tanks, APC cuts, cuts to the F-35 fleet, cuts to the Hercules aircraft as well. These all now need to be reconsidered if we are not only to defend British interests, but to play our role as the NATO Secretary General is now calling for, given the security problems in Eastern Europe and beyond. Okay, but we're talking about huge sums of money here. Now, they may be necessary, but they need to be paid for. Paul Johnson of the Institute for Fiscal Studies tweeted this morning in response to these claims of defence spending going up to 2.5% of GDP, said it's the reduction in defence spending over the past 60 years that's made way for the welfare state without the need to raise taxes. So you're either now, with taxes already rising to record levels, putting up taxes again, or curtailing the welfare state. If this is so important, how do you propose that we pay for it? Simplistic argument to make that correlation. You manage your defence capability, your defence posture according to the threats that are coming over the horizon.
Indeed, but you need to pay for it.
Absolutely you do, but if you don't then respond to those threats, I'm afraid our world will change fundamentally. Geopolitically, we are entering a new era of insecurity. That's what we need to wake up to.
Okay,
so
but I didn't challenge you on that. I didn't challenge you on that, Mr. Elwood. I was just asking, and in the first case, accepting your argument that more needs to be spent. It's just how you spend it. I mean, because that also, it's like, you need to surely make the political argument as to where it comes from.
Yes, and that is for the Treasury to have those discussions, as we saw with COVID as well. But I make it very, very clear that we need to be more front-footed in what we do in order to make sure that we have a peaceful Europe. Take Odessa, for example. We are too hesitant in actually using the utility of force to protect that city, that port, to allow the grain to get out. If the grain gets out, then the price of grain drops, and actually future security then is then back on the agenda. Okay. The famine will be avoided in Africa, and the price of food will drop in this country. So it's in our interest to lean forward, but you can only do that if you then invest in your military.
Okay, well, we are seeing at the moment a reduction. I mean, the plan at the moment is that take the Army, 82,000, to be cut to 72,500 by 2025. This is, I mean, in one sense I don't know what your feeling is about how this money is spent, but does that need to be stopped and immediately reversed?
Yes, I mean, that's what I've said. In all three services, there are cuts that are imminent that need to be reversed. The number of tanks has been cut by a third. The warrior fighting vehicle has been removed completely, or is about to be removed completely. That needs to be reversed as well.
And the number of troops?
The number of troops absolutely needs to go probably higher than about the 82,000, given the tempo of commitment that we're now involved in, including participating in this 30,000 rapid reaction force. I make it very clear that we go back to the original point of what the head of the army said. This is our 1937 moment. So if we do hesitate, if we do allow these jump cuts to go through, where does our world go? Let's learn from what happened in history. Let's stand firm and let's show that we can lead in Europe against this threat that Putin is pushing forward.
Tobias Elwood, thank you very much. Coming up, we'll consider what next for the Conservative rebels who want rid of Boris Johnson. We're speaking to the prominent backbencher Steve Baker. Our hashtag on social media is hashtag BBCWATO. Our email address, world@bbc.co.uk. A worker heard a cry for help from a huge truck that was abandoned on the side of the road on the outskirts of San Antonio in Texas. They called the fire station. What they found, in their words, stacks of bodies in that truck. In total, there were at least 46 dead. It's thought the victims were undocumented migrants who'd crossed over from Mexico. Charles Hood is the local fire chief. He said 16 survivors had been taken to hospital.
Occasions that we saw were hot to the touch. They were suffering from heat stroke, heat exhaustion, no signs of water in the vehicle. It wasn't refrigerated tractor trailer, but there was no visible working AC unit on that rig. We are currently putting those 60 members through critical incident stress debriefing. Again, we're not supposed to open up a truck and see stacks of bodies in there. None of us come to work imagining that.
Angelica Casas is a BBC reporter in San Antonio. And Angelica, Reuters is reporting that number, I quoted 46, that it's gone up to 50 now dead. What is the latest you can bring us?
Yes, so right now we know that the number could easily go up, and we know that there's also victims in the hospital, and we don't know yet what their state is looking like. We just know that there's both men and women, including 4 children. So we're still waiting this morning to hear from either the police chief or, the investigators, which are now federal.
Do they have any information about where the truck was coming from or meant to be going to?
Not where it was coming from, but we do know that here in San Antonio, I-35 is a direct link to the border. So the truck was found on the outskirts of the town, but really close to I-35, which is the main highway that connects the Texas border to the rest of Texas, and even beyond, it goes up north through the United States. So we're not sure yet where it was going. We can only assume that it was coming from the Texas border.
Right, and what is the political reaction to this?
Well, as most things, things easily become a blame game, and so we did see Governor Greg Abbott react last night, saying that this was on Joe Biden, that the deaths were a result of his open border policies. Although we do know that quite clearly right now we've had closed border policies with Title 42, which was a health mandate that was put in order when the coronavirus pandemic began, which prohibited the entrance of migrants, even those sometimes seeking asylum. But this has also increased the number of migrants coming in illegally into the United States. So again, we've started seeing that blame game. Things always become political, even when it's about migrant deaths. So right now, that's what we've seen so far.
Angelica Casas, thank you very much. The arch-Eurosceptic Conservative MP Steve Baker has made no secret of the fact that he thinks Boris Johnson should go. He used to be a fan, even campaigning to oust Theresa May in favour of Boris Johnson. But what happened with Partygate led him to change his mind. The Prime Minister won a vote of confidence among his MPs, and under the current rules, he cannot be challenged for another year. So now Mr Baker plans to stand for election to the executive of the 1922 Committee of Backbench Conservatives who set the rules and decide if their party leader stays in post. He joins me now. Good afternoon, Mr Baker.
Very good afternoon.
First off, can you just set out why you want the Prime Minister to go now?
Well, you made the case very but truth is, voting for this, so needs to suck gracefully.
This line does not sound great. Let us see if we can try to stabilise that line too, Steve Baker. And in the meantime, while we try and sort that out, let's move on to another story, to another interview that I did this morning, because it was a month ago that the Chancellor set out £15 billion of extra payments to help people with the high cost of living. Yesterday, that decision was given royal assent. There are now a complicated list of different payments from central and local government. Many will be paid automatically to those on benefits, to pensioners and those with a disability. £400 should also come off every household electricity bill. But there are also council payments that are discretionary and have to be applied for. We thought we should try to make it clear who's eligible for what, whether it will be paid automatically, and how you can ensure you're not losing out. The Minister for Welfare Delivery is David Rutley. I spoke to him this morning and asked first about the extra payments for people receiving means-tested benefits.